So my assignment this morning is to do a very quick opening lecture. I saw someone like Mike Adegbe. Good to see you. Welcome. Um, and I'll make that very snappy so that we can chew on our very, very extinguished guest session. The theme of the Unravel is visible and possible. And it almost sounds like a cliche because we seem to always be talking about visibility and possibilities. But I think that most of the things that we've heard and we have seen are things that are discussed on a very, very shallow pedestal. I think that the subject of visibility and possibilities are way deeper than we seem to make it appear. Visibility and possibilities. So write this down very quickly. The visible is usually the possible. The visible is usually the possible. What I'm trying to say here is that it's very easy to interpret the visible to be possible. Does that make sense? I think that it's very easy that we can categorize everything that is visible to be possible. And that is part of our limitation. That the visible is usually what we think is the possible. Number two is that the possible is not always visible. The possible is not always visible. It is a risk to define your life only around what is visible, because it will be a shortfall of the things that you can become. If your life is captured within the parameters of the visible, then you are undermining your potentials, because the visible always appears possible. But what is truly possible is not always visible. Is that making sense to you at all? The reason why there is a huge gap between the multi-millionaires and the billionaires of our age and those who are of the lower class is what I have just said. The people at the average level are operating with the visible. The people at the higher level are operating around the margins of the possible. And those who are at the higher level are tapping into possibilities that are not visible. Shallow minds always try to unlock the visible. The reason why many investments are not explored is because people can't see them. Many things that we see today. So once you see a friend of yours doing fashion, everybody wants to do fashion because we can see what people are doing with fashion. So it's visible, and then we think it's possible. When you see someone being an architect, you just want to be an architect because it's visible, and because it's visible, you believe it's possible. But there are possibilities under the surface of architecture and fashion that many of us have not explored because we're in the realm of the visible. And your life cannot be controlled by the visible. In fact, many of us are limited by what we know, because what you know sets you free, and what you know also limits you. Yes. We only know one dimension of truth, that the truth that you know will set you free. But sometimes the truth that you know is not all the truth there is. So you are limited within the confines of your truth. Are you saying that now? Many of you have no idea how things run in Moscow because your truth is within the parameters of Nigeria. So you have no clue what works in Moscow and what doesn't work in Moscow. But there are truths beyond the walls of Nigeria. Am I correct? Some of you here, you have your truth in fashion, but there are possibilities out there for you beyond the walls of fashion that you have not explored because you are living in truth, but you are living in a confined truth. What you know is true, but what you know is not all there is to know. So knowledge can set you free, and knowledge can bring untold limitations. Write this down. Ordinary lives are focused on the visible and the impossible. Now, this sounds very, very strange because you are wondering, Apeh, what is your problem? What is your English is confusing? You can't be talking about possibilities and you want us to, dare the impossible. And you are saying that low minds focus on the visible and the impossible. Maybe there's an error in your note. Maybe what you meant to say is that average minds focus on the visible and the possible. No. Average minds actually focus on the visible and the impossible. So an average mind is always talking about what they can see and what they can't do. Here. Hope you get this. An average mind is always discussing what they can see that is visible, and they are always discussing what they cannot do. The impossible. And that's why I'm a faith person, but I would rather say I will live long than say I shall not die. See, when you say I shall not die, you are actually echoing the negative. I shall not fail. No, I will succeed. Because when you say things like I cannot fail, you are actually echoing the negative. Somewhere your mind takes I cannot and fail together. Those are both negative dimensions. I shall succeed. Shall is positive. Succeed is positive. Then your life drives towards the positive. So the average mind is always focused on what? The visible and the impossible. Look, Apeh, forget this one. It's not for us. This one is not our level. This is where we are. It's good. It's a good idea, but it's not my idea. This one is not for people like us. You see, we are always focused on the impossible. Great minds are usually focused on the invisible and the possible. What did I say? The great minds are always focused on the invisible and the impossible. What is the invisible? The invisible is what is visible inside. Yes. The invisible is a reality, but they are usually on the inside where the eyes usually can't capture. And I'll talk more about that when I come back up for my main session. You can't truly unlock the possible until you engage the invisible. And when you engage the invisible, you unlock the possible. And then the possible becomes visible. You see that now? So I'll give you simple examples. Then I can sit down and bring in the iconic architects. If you were a friend of Mark Zuckerberg a few years ago, and he shared with you the idea of Facebook, many of you would have called him for counseling. You say, Marco, come. Marco, do something with your life. You can't go and design an app that will be showing people's pictures. Mark, do something with what? Your life. Now, imagine that the CEO of Uber came to you and said that I want to build the biggest transportation company that will require no car. I'm not going to invest 1 naira in buying 1 car, but I want to build the biggest transportation company. What will you advise him? Go and see your pastor. You need anointing oil. The reason why you gave him that advice is because you can't see what he saw. The only thing that you know is what has been visible. And all your life, to To own a transport company, you must buy a car. And he's coming to you saying that he wants to have the biggest transport taxi company without owning one vehicle. Because he has tapped into the realms of possibilities that are invisible. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Unravel.